Now, I don't know about you, but it can be a little difficult to keep up with every film that's coming out these days. After all, films don't just come to the cinema anymore. They're firing out onto seemingly tens of different streaming services all the time, and it can be easy to miss even the most buzziest examples. This is Whatculture, and here are awesome movies you probably missed. The Caine Mutiny Court-Martial. The latest major adaptation of the 1952 stage play, The Caine Mutiny Court-Martial was directed by the late, great William Friedkin and was also the visionary filmmaker's last ever work, debuting posthumously on Paramount Plus a few months after he passed away at the age of 87. A director of Friedkin's stature deserved more than a streaming debut for his last ever film, especially given it's really quite great. A throwback to one of the best traditions in US film history, the courtroom drama. God, I can't get enough of these. And like the very best efforts in that genre, Friedkin stacked his Caine Mutiny adaptation with a glorious cast, led by the always underrated Jason Clarke, and with Kiefer Sutherland delivering one of his best ever performances as the embattled Commander Queeg. Top Gun Maverick and Thunderbolts' Lewis Pullman also appears, with the late Lance Reddick lending gravitas to the production as head judge Captain Blakely. Ultimately, what Friedkin fashions here is distinctly minimalist, but with an impact that leaves a deafening echo. Go watch it if you haven't already.
Boss Level. Time loop movies are all the rage right now, and while Boss Level doesn't quite reach the finesse of, say, Palm Springs, it also clearly doesn't want to. This totally bonkers sci-fi actioner stars Frank Grillo as a retired soldier who finds himself caught in a time loop, which, you guessed it, always culminates in his brutal death. Grillo, who has long been in search for a fitting star vehicle for his grizzled talents, is terrific as our no-nonsense lead, while writer-director Joe Carnahan knocks both the loony action and breezy humour out of the park. Just as time loop movies are starting to ironically feel rather repetitious, here's one that's refreshingly creative and fiercely off the wall.
The Order. Given a limited release at the end of 2024 in select territories, Justin Kurzel's The Order is another film that managed to get lost in the holiday season streaming shuffle, being snapped up by Amazon for international distribution and promptly exiting the movie discourse sphere in the process. Thanks, Jeff. This, despite it being directed by Justin Kurzel, who has acquitted himself as a director really well over the last decade, give or take an Assassin's Creed, and it featuring Jude Law and Nicholas Hoult in two raw and challenging performances. The former is an FBI agent on the hunt to dismantle a white supremacist group in the 1980s, and the latter the leader of said group, the real-life Bob Matthews. With that real-life context in mind, The Order is sickeningly effective at delving into the bones of racism and white supremacy in the modern United States, shining a light on a dark chapter of US history that remains depressingly relevant in the here and now. It's dark, meditative, and a great showcase of the talents of Law and Hoult, the latter of whom is continuing his ascent as one of the strongest actors working today.
The Kid Detective. Honestly, it remains incredibly surprising that the thoroughly charming, devilishly handsome Adam Brody did not become a movie star in his own right once The OC wrapped up in 2007. But if he did, we probably wouldn't have the gift that is The Kid Detective, a terrific neo-noir which casts Brody as Abraham Ape Applebaum, a former revered child detective who, as an adult, is locked in a state of arrested development. However, booze-slozzled Abe eyes a chance at redemption when he teams up with a local girl, Caroline, to track down her boyfriend's murderer. This is absolutely a movie best watched with limited information, but know simply that The Kid Detective is at once a delicious satire of pulp crime novels and a brilliant example of one.
Saturday Night. Okay, so hands up here who thought that Saturday Night was also going to be a boringly schmaltzy and overly dramatized take on the creation of that show. Maybe not an unfair prediction given how overly sentimental Jason Reitman's Ghostbusters films were, but you know what? I really think he got the balance right with this particular one. Okay, so in short, Saturday Night is beautifully crafted comedic chaos. It's a stressful load of muchness, delivering plenty of devastatingly funny gags the whole freaking time, and at the end of the story, it emerges as this triumphant hymn to creativity and perseverance, as what would become a touchstone of American pop culture launches against all the odds. Also, I do just have a deep affection for this era of on-screen comedy, so yeah, what can I say? It got me good. The film also has a ridiculously stacked cast, headlined by the Fabelman's Gabriel LaBelle on wonderful form, and featuring a limitless treasure trove of delicious supporting talent. This includes Willem Dafoe, J.K. Simmons, Corey Michael Smith's uncanny impersonation of a young Chevy Chase, and even Succession's Nicholas Braun in a dual role, playing both Andy Kaufman and Muppet creator Jim Henson, to name but a few of the amazing people that feature. Go watch it, even if you're a bit skeptical.
I care a lot. If Rosamund Pike's post-Gone Girl career has been pretty milquetoast, all things considered, I Care a Lot is a sublime showcase for her acting prowess, and one which quietly netted her a Best Actress nomination at the Golden Globes. Pike is sublimely detestable as Marla Grayson, a legal guardian who scams elderly people out of their assets by convincing the courts they're infirm and can no longer look after themselves. It's a ripe, timely premise for a black comedy caper, and writer-director Jay Blakeson does a fantastic job milking the sensational premise for every infuriating drop. Pike is the obvious MVP, though there's fantastic support from the rest of the cast, including Peter Dinklage as her crime boss son. Though some of its twists and turns won't be to all tastes, the film takes some admirably bold risks, weaving an entertainingly slushy crime thriller with a splash of social relevance re-American healthcare and late-stage capitalism.
Exhuma. You don't have to be subscribed to Whatculture Horror to know that it's been a pretty bumper decade for the genre so far, although you should definitely do that because you cook up some pretty cool stuff there. But one downside to this is that the buzziest films tend to overshadow those smaller efforts that are just as deserving of mainstream attention. Case in point, Exhuma, a South Korean thriller that dropped in 2024. It's not surprising that this has flown under the radar, for screenings in the West were few and far between. As such, this is a PSA to go and check out this excellent supernatural horror flick right now. The horror fans who sleep on this are doing themselves a huge disservice. Exhuma uses familiar genre tropes to tell a heartfelt, gripping, and uniquely Korean story. It does all of this while offering up superb filmmaking, clever non-linear editing, and a bevy of fantastic performances, including from old boys Choi Min-sik in the bargain. It's just a wonderful horror movie, and one of the genre's best from 2024, which sadly most won't have even heard of. Thankfully, the film has made its way onto Shudder, so hopefully more viewers will start to discover its atmospheric delights sooner rather than later.
The Empty Man. After spending years working as a production documentarian for David Fincher, David Pryor was given the go-ahead to write and direct his own horror movie, The Empty Man. Shot in the summer of 2017, the film ended up languishing on Fox's shelf for over 3 years following disastrous test screenings, before it was quietly dumped in US cinemas last October. Though it received polarizing reviews on release and scored a dreaded D+ cinema score, the film underwent a hasty re-evaluation once it hit VOD and has since become a cult fave with horror fans. The Empty Man is far from perfect. For starters, it's 137 minutes long, but between its ambitious, epic storytelling, expectation-defying approach to the genre, sharp visuals, and solid performances, it's a ride well worth taking. The opening 20-minute pre-title sequence is in itself an excellent short film, and while the rest of the movie never quite reaches that level, it's still a richly atmospheric and provocative outing for genre aficionados.
Presence. Steven Soderbergh's Presence was a victim of mismarketing. Viewers were sold a horror film shot from the perspective of a ghost, and that's not what it is. Not really. Rather, it's a story about a family that just so happens to be shown through a ghost's eyes. There are some horror elements, yeah, but even those are largely confined to the latter reels of the picture. As such, the film got a pretty mixed response from audiences, and that doesn't do it justice in any way. With its unique storytelling device in mind, Presence could have easily just been a gimmick, but because it also has a tremendous script and fleshed out characters performed by a killer cast, it's so much more. Furthermore, the POV cinematography is integrated into the narrative in unexpected ways, making this an unusually involving and immersive ghost story, and one really fitting for the decade we're currently living in. Ultimately, Presence is a film that really uses its unique trick to enhance the movie and give it new meanings, as well as being yet another testament to the innovative brilliance of Soderbergh as a filmmaker, who's making an unfortunate habit of being overlooked by mainstream audiences over the last few years. Like, seriously, between this, Kimmy, and Black Bag, Viewed has put together some of the most fascinating, independently minded genre outings since the beginning of the decade, and yet that still hasn't translated to buzz and box office. That really needs to change, because it's no exaggeration to say that he's still one of the best in the business.
Black Bear. In Black Bear, Aubrey Plaza proves just how talented a dramatic actress she really is, playing an embattled filmmaker who retreats to a cabin in the hope of rejuvenating her creative juices. This is another film where you're better off knowing very little going in. Know simply that this surreal drama slaloms effortlessly between genres in a clever and discomforting way, ensuring viewers are left on an even keel throughout. As both an examination of the creative process and a showcase for Plaza's go-for-broke performance, Black Bear is a mighty, twisty film which continually skirts expectations, even if its opaque nature is definitely going to exasperate more literally minded viewers.
Rye Lane. Romantic comedies haven't really done well for the most part in more recent times, bar a couple of big exceptions. So here's an incredible treat for fans of the genre. Rye Lane. This is a rom-com for the ages. Not only is it touching and sincere, and not only is it headlined by the lovable double act of David Johnson and Vivian Oprah, it's also a brilliantly inventive piece of cinema filled with dazzling cinematography, unpredictable gags, and joyous comedic surrealism. Even though it's a low-budget British indie film, it's also one of the most movie movies that came out in 2023. One that suggests a glorious future lies in wait for writer-director Rain Allen Miller, who made her debut here. Like many of the other films on this list, Rye Lane received justified critical acclaim, but didn't necessarily reach as wide an audience as it could have done. So it's another flick where one just has to cross their fingers and hope more people see it further down the line. You better be crossing.
Barb and Star go to Vista Del Mar. A delightfully smart, stupid comedy about two Midwestern women who vacation in Florida and get caught up in a crime caper, the film is the tight-slapping, laugh-a-minute movie to beat this year. A game mix of broad humor and more heightened weirdness, Barb and Star benefits not only from the hilarious commitment of its lead actresses, but also a show-stealing supporting turn from Jamie Dornan as the pair's goofy love interest, Edgar. Perhaps more than any other film on this list, Barb and Star has the potential to become an out-and-out cult classic.
About Dry Grasses. Turkish director Nuri Bilge Ceylan has delivered several of the 21st century's most acclaimed films, including the beloved Once Upon a Time in Anatolia and the Palme d'Or winning Winter Sleep. With his latest movie, About Dry Grasses, his first film of the 2020s, he's at it again, telling the story of a teacher who faces an accusation of inappropriate behavior. About Dry Grasses is a stark existential piece that'll leave viewers melancholy and contemplative in equal measure. Although the pace occasionally slackens over its 3-hour runtime, it actually lends itself to the morose nature of the piece overall. Furthermore, even if the movie is a slow burn, and there's nothing wrong with that, there's always so much going on. Every shot of the film, many of which are the static, beautiful landscape shots Ceylan is known for, is detailed and atmospheric, and every conversation is layered and packed with nuance. As such, however long and however melancholic the film might be, it's a rich and rewarding sucker punch that provokes a ton of thoughts and offers up beautiful visuals in the bargain. Do not let this one pass you by.
The Wolf of Snow Hollow. After Jim Cummings stormed onto the scene with his superb 2018 drama Thunder Road, few would have ever expected his next film to be a horror comedy. Yet, despite its seemingly typical werewolf movie premise, The Wolf of Snow Hollow is anything but, gradually pulling back the layers to reveal that it's far more playful and subversive than you'd expect from the gnarly opening setup. As writer/director/star, Cummings continues to prove himself a prodigiously talented artist. If the Coen brothers ever made a werewolf movie, it would probably end up something like this, hilarious in a totally left-field way, beautifully filmed, and perfectly cast.
The Apprentice. Many seemed quite resistant to the idea of a film about a young Donald J. Trump, and Sebastian Stan seemed like a bit of a random casting choice for the lead role given all the MCU baggage. As such, when the film received a muted critical response, it wasn't all that surprising. All that said, however, The Apprentice is actually great. A sincere, disturbing, and ultimately captivating origin story for one of the world's most loathed men. It's a masterful piece of character development that tracks its interpretation of Trump's journey from an insecure man with daddy issues into the ruthless, tyrannical business mogul he would one day become. He does so through the narrative device of the Faustian relationship between Trump and his mentor, attorney and McCarthyite disciple Roy Cohn, played by a phenomenal Jeremy Strong, who teaches Trump what he needs to get ahead, but soon finds himself abandoned by his protege when he needs him most. And of course, the biggest surprise here is Stan's lead performance, for which he deservedly received an Oscar nom. But despite the accolades it received, The Apprentice still feels hugely overlooked.
Supernova. Criminally overlooked by both the Oscars and general punters, Supernova is a heart-wrenching drama focused on two partners of 20 years, Sam and Tusker, as they come to terms with Tusker's diagnosis of early-onset dementia. It's stating the obvious to declare that Supernova is a tearjerker, but thanks to writer-director Harry McQueen's sensitive work, it's also so much more than a mere weepy drama. Our lead characters are imbued with so much warmth through their characterization and performances, despite the upsetting subject matter, and it really is Tusker's journey, that of a man approaching the end of his life with bravery and dignity, which absolutely steals the show. The premise may sound overfamiliar and sentiment-rich on paper, but there's a disarming honesty to the writing and acting, which helps it feel totally and utterly fresh.
The Ugly Stepsister. The story of Cinderella has been done to death at this point, and with several underwhelming Cinderella films having been released in recent times, it's possible audiences might be a bit sick of the whole glass slipper thing. That would be fair enough, but there is one Cinderella film that must not be missed. The Ugly Stepsister, a Norwegian horror comedy which reimagines the whole story in a deliciously twisted manner. A body horror worthy of being mentioned alongside The Substance, The Ugly Stepsister is an absolute gem. A grisly, darkly funny, and poignant satire of unrealistic beauty standards that flips an oft-told story on its head in the most entertaining, effed up of ways. This is a film that will have you grinning from ear to ear one scene, and then make you question your life choices that led to you watching it the next. This didn't get much of a cinema release, and so if there's any justice in this world at all, this movie will find its audience through home viewing.
The Informer. The Informer is a sturdy, restrained adaptation of the 2009 hit crime novel 3 Seconds. You've seen similar movies before. An ex-con works undercover for the FBI to bring down the Polish mob. But there's an uncommon delicacy to Andrea Di Stefano's direction, giving his skilled ensemble plenty of room to let character beats breathe. The suspenseful storytelling is matched by a never-better Kinnaman and a tight ensemble. Sure, it doesn't offer up too many surprises, but familiar material well told speaks for itself. And if you're able to see past the generic streamer-friendly title, this is a crime thriller of uncommon composure.
The Seed of the Sacred Fig. One Oscar that maybe should have gone to a different movie was the one for Best Foreign Language Feature. Don't get me wrong, I'm Still Here is a great movie and a worthy winner by any reasonable metric. But there was something even more impressive lurking in the wings. Mohamed Razulov's The Seed of the Sacred Fig. Much like I'm Still Here, The Seed of the Sacred Fig is a devastating indictment of an oppressive regime. Sadly, while the former film focused on historical oppression, Seed's narrative is more contemporary. It blends documentary and fiction in a way that's characteristic of Iranian cinema, with real events being worked into the narrative. And the film took on a whole new meaning when Razalov was sentenced to imprisonment for his repeated defiance of censorship. Himself and some of the cast and crew actually fled to Europe not long after the film was completed. Regardless, even without that context, Seed is a masterful film. Razalov's tense direction and layered screenplay shows a fantastic filmmaker at the height of his powers, and his terrific work here is buoyed by exquisite performances from an astonishingly good cast. Seed received a fairly limited release, and for that reason it won't have reached as many people as it should have, which is so frustrating. Hopefully it'll find a wider audience soon, because it's definitely one of the best films of the decade so far.
Violation. First of all, Violation is not for the weak of heart. While technically a revenge film, it is so far outside the orbit of a typical exploitation movie that description really doesn't feel accurate. This dramatic horror film is a deeply discomforting examination of the impact of trauma and the nature of revenge. The film takes a completely matter-of-fact approach to the central issue, refusing to shy away from brutal, nauseating violence, nor the humanity-eroding psychological implications and the quest for vengeance. Sims Fewer gives one of the most striking and unforgettable performances in any horror movie of the past year, while as a filmmaker, she also expertly deconstructs a genre too often used for cheap titillation and lazy catharsis. The less you know about it going in, the better, even if you'll probably only ever want to watch this one once.